Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and tonight I'm proud to bring you THEOSOPHIA, Esoteric Studies, and we have with us as a host Lynne Salomon Miceli of the ARE Center in New York City. Greetings, Lynne.
Greetings. Thank you, Hercules. Nice to be here.
I will leave you two to your conversation. I'll be here in case you need me.
Great. Thank you very much. So my guest tonight is Ed Foote, who is going to be talking about how to find your soul's purpose. Ed's two spiritual paths are the Edgar Cayce readings and the book A Course in Miracles. Just for anybody who doesn't know, although I'm always amazed that some people don't, Edgar Cayce was an American psychic and a mystic who lived from 1877 to 1945 and gave over 14,000 psychic readings that were taken down by a stenographer at a time when people weren't doing readings that much. There weren't so many people doing them as there are today. His readings covered topics including remedies for illnesses, spiritual development, reincarnation and karma, ancient cultures, including Atlantis and Lemuria, and much, much more. Ed Foote has been a student of the Cayce readings and the Course in Miracles for over 30 years. He travels around the country lecturing on these topics. He has also led over 400 church services for Unity, Presbyterian, and other metaphysical churches in all parts of the United States as a layperson, and has taught sacred dance at churches from coast to coast. He's a full-time square dance caller, having called for over 50 years in every state, 10 European countries, and in Australia and New Zealand. And he has a home program of square dance clubs in the Pittsburgh area where he lives and where he's coming to us from now. Ed speaks on many topics, but tonight we decided to concentrate on finding your soul's purpose. So welcome, Ed.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Hello, everyone.
Great to have you. Before we jump in, I'd just like to say that at some point in this conversation, Ed will be sharing 8 questions you can ask yourself to know if you're on the right track with your soul's purpose. So if your life purpose is something you're trying to figure out, you might want to have a pen and paper and make some notes. So let's start from the basics, Ed. How would you define the soul? What is the soul?
Well, according to Edgar Cayce, the soul is made up of 3 components: spirit, mind, and will. Spirit is access to the life force, and we have an access to a spark of God, and then the mind and the will. And Cayce says we are to be co-creators with God. We are to align our will with the divine will.
And can you give a quick summary of the story of the soul? I guess it would be the story of the soul as Edgar Cayce tells it. Maybe, of course, it is.
Edgar Cayce said way back when, eons ago, we were all souls floating through the air. If you've seen these nature films where the birds all swoop in one direction and then swoop in the other direction, or fish in these giant schools of fish, and they all move in one direction or then another way. That's the way we were. We were all souls in the universe, and we were all happy and just floating around the universe. And then we saw Earth, and some of us decided we liked what Earth looked like, so we would go down and take a look. And the people that went down to Earth fell in love with the physical components and couldn't get back out. And the rest of us saw these people, these souls that were trapped in the earth, and said, we'll go down and rescue them. And we got trapped too, and that's why we're all in the earth, and we've spent ever since trying to get our way back. And that's a very, very quick, short explanation of the soul's story, according to Edgar Cayce.
A very quick, short explanation. So when we were floating around in the universe, we were not in physical bodies. We were like God. We were beings of light and spirit.
Correct.
Yeah. And then we got ourselves into these bodies, and at first it was fun, and then we kind of got stuck. That's the general idea. Forgot who we were, forgot that we were beings of light.
Right. And we've been trying to work our way back to our previous recognition ever since.
So that does tie into the soul's purpose. How is our soul's purpose determined from the start?
Well, we determine our soul's purpose before we incarnate into Earth. Edgar Cayce is big on reincarnation. He said we come into Earth school numerous times until we learn our lessons, and then we go on to the next school. Edgar Cayce said that Earth is the best school there is. Of all the schools in the universe, the Earth is the best school there is, but he said it's also the toughest. And so our job here is to do our soul's purpose. Cayce says that the purpose of each soul in the earth is to make manifest the love of God in daily life. So you can ask yourself the general question, are you doing that? If you are, great. If not, why, maybe we consider tweaking our lives a little bit to make manifest the love of God in our daily life.
So obviously it seems like it's important to know your soul's purpose, but that's kind of a general soul's purpose.
Right.
Does it get, go ahead.
It's important. Excuse me. It's important to know our mission in life, because if we do know it, then we'll keep on the path of our mission and we will accomplish a lot. If we don't know our mission in life, then we're going to kind of meander around and maybe we'll cross our path where we're supposed to be, and then we wind up over here and then we wind up over there. And we just don't accomplish in our life what we set out to accomplish before we incarnated and what we are meant to accomplish in our life. So if we can know what our soul's purpose is, we're going to advance our souls in this life much more than if we don't know what our soul's purpose is. There's a quote from Edgar Cayce that says, even though you gain the whole world, how little you must think of yourself if you lose the purpose for why your soul entered this particular stay on Earth. There's also a nice quote from George Eliot, the British author. He said, it's never too late to be what you might have been. So if you've never thought about your soul's purpose, it's never too late. Some people say, well, I'm in the back half of my life, or I'm in my senior years, so I don't have to worry about soul's purpose. Well, as long as you're still here in Earth School, it's important that we know our soul's purpose. We still have plenty of time to accomplish what we are supposed to do here in Earth School.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about you saying that Earth School is the toughest school. It certainly feels like that sometimes. Definitely feels that way sometimes. So you gave what's kind of like a general soul's purpose for everybody, but does it get more specific than that?
Yes, there are two specific types of soul's purpose. There are universal soul's purposes. These are purposes that we all come into Earth to do, whether we live here or Africa or outer Mongolia. There are universal purposes. There are 7 of these that we all come into Earth to do. And then the second type of soul's purpose is the individual soul's purpose. What you specifically are here to do yourself. And those two combined comprise the whole topic of soul's purpose.
Do you want to talk about those 7 universal soul's purposes?
It's important to discuss these. The 7 universal soul's purposes, and if you're taking notes, you might want to jot these down because these are kind of important. Number 1 is healing. Healing. Now, when I first became involved in metaphysics almost 40 years ago, and I heard this about healing, I went right out and took a laying on of hands healing course. And that's fine. There's no problem with that. But in terms of universal soul's purpose, healing means much more than that. Healing means healing every soul that we come in contact with. And how do we heal? By our actions, by our words, and even our thoughts. Edgar Cayce said, thoughts are things. So we can help or hurt an individual's soul simply by how we think about them. In terms of healing, there's a well-known psychologist, Dr. Lee Jampolsky. He's the son of Gerald Jampolsky. He said, to have and live your purpose today, ask these questions. What if today every thought I have is a thought with the intention to heal instead of harm? Interesting thing to think on. So healing is the first universal soul's purpose. The second universal purpose is love. We are to express love. Cayce said, a quote from Cayce, perfect love casts out fear. The Course in Miracles says, teach only love, for that is what you are. The Course in Miracles says, when you want only love, you will see nothing else. And Edgar Cayce says, love is that attribute of the soul that enables us to live, enables us to give, asking nothing in return. Love is the attribute of the soul that enables us to give without asking anything in return. So love is obviously very important and one of the most important of the soul's purposes. The third soul's purpose is service. Cayce is very big on service. He has a wonderful quote. It says, we grow to heaven leaning on the arm of someone we have helped. Interesting. Think who you have helped. And when you grow to heaven, as you go to heaven, you will go there leaning on the arm of someone you have helped. Cayce said that Jesus' favorite prayer was others, Lord, others. Cayce also said that each soul has its own duty to perform for others, be a channel of blessings for someone. So service to others is very, very important to Edgar Cayce and very important in a lot of the major religions of the earth. So our first three universal soul's purposes are number one, healing, number two, express love, number three, service to others. Number four is forgiveness. Forgiveness is very important. The Course in Miracles says our function here on earth is to learn how to forgive. We don't know how to forgive. Excuse me. So that's our function, why we're here, to learn how to forgive. Now, the dictionary definition of forgiveness says that forgiveness means to release, to let go of, to cease to feel resentment against someone. But we want to look at forgiveness from the Christ perspective. So when we look at forgiveness from the Christ perspective, first we have to determine what forgiveness is not. And once we learn that, then we can say what forgiveness is. So forgiveness is not forgiveness to destroy. And that's a phrase. If you're taking notes, write that down. Forgiveness to destroy. What is forgiveness to destroy? Forgiveness to destroy overlooks no sin, no crime, no guilt, picks out all the evil things you can find about someone and overlooks anything loving about them like the plague. When we hold a grievance against someone, we don't want to hear anything nice about them. We only want to look at the negative things about that person. We don't want to hear anybody else say anything nice about them too. And if we are willing to forgive at all, it's only after making sure that the entire world knows how aggrieved that this person has been to us and made us feel bad. And so this merely reinforces the forgiveness to destroy. Now, there are four types of forgiveness to destroy. Not that any of you practice these, of course, all these other people out there, because merely the fact that you're listening to this podcast means you have already achieved some degree of enlightenment. So, but you may recognize these four types of forgiveness to destroy that you've seen other people do. Number one, the first forgiveness to destroy, holier than thou. I am so noble that I will forgive little you. That's the first type of forgiveness to destroy. The second type is the flip side of that. It says, I'm sinful, you're sinful, we're all sinful, so I'm just as deserving of condemnation as you are. Now, on the surface, this appears rather humble, but what it really says, it means that we're thinking we can destroy and change the perfection that was created by God, because we are all God's creations. The third type of forgiveness to destroy is martyrdom. I will sacrifice myself to forgive little you. Now, this isn't love, it's really just subtle cruelty. And then the fourth type of forgiveness to destroy is conditional forgiveness. This says that forgiveness must be bought, it must be earned, and we will set ourselves up to be the judge and jury to determine what these terms are. And all this does is reinforce the belief in guilt and separation. So those are the four types of forgiveness to destroy. But what we want, for purposes of the universal soul's purpose, we want to know the Christ definition of forgiveness. The Christ definition of forgiveness. It's the means by which we are healed. It's the means by which we are healed. The means by which we are restored to the remembrance that we were created by love and the remembrance of God's love. Now, Gerald Jampolsky, in his book, Love is Letting Go of Fear, says that there are really only two emotions. Now, you probably can list umpteen emotions, but Gerald Jampolsky says it all boils down to only two: fear or love. And you can't have both at the same time. Now, if a little child came to you, and let's say you're having your grandson who's 6 years old spending the weekend at your house, and he has his own little bedroom. Middle of the night, he comes over to your room crying, all upset because he's had a bad dream, and he's all upset. What would you do with this little child? Would you go whap, whap, whap? No, you dummy. You just had a bad dream. Go back to bed. No, we all agree we would comfort the child, escort him back to bed, tell him there are no boogeymen under the bed, and stay with him until he fell asleep. And we all recognize that that's what we would do. But it's a different situation. If an adult is in your face, giving you for whatever, shouting at you or criticizing you, the key is both the little child and the adult are coming from fear. And can you recognize that? Can you see that? Can you see that the adult is coming from fear just as the little child is? If you can see it, you've made a big leap forward in practicing the universal soul's purpose of forgiveness. So the next time someone may be in your face and disagreeing with you and not being nice to you, remember the story of the little child. Remember that this adult is coming from fear also. And can you respond to this adult the same way that you respond to the little child? So that's number 4, forgiveness, universal soul's purpose. Number 5, becoming more aware of the divine within, both in ourselves and in others. A quote from Cayce. Cayce said, get my right sheet here. Cayce believed that true prayer was not so much a petition for things as an expression of one's desire to gain an awareness of God. Cayce said, prayer is supplication for direction, for understanding. Meditation is listening to the divine within. I think most of you have heard the phrase, prayer is talking to God, meditation is listening to God. So if some of your mainline church friends say, well, I pray all the time, I don't get any results. Well, maybe because you're talking all the time, therefore you aren't listening. So we need to spend equal amount of time listening to God through meditation as we do in prayer. So meditation and prayer are both very important. Cayce is very big on meditation as well as on prayer. And Cayce says, once we are more aware of the divine within ourselves and others, then we have to act on it. We have to act on it. Cayce is very big on action. Once you learn something, you have to act on it. Cayce made an interesting quote. Unused knowledge is sin. Now, that's something to consider if you've never thought of that before. So becoming more aware of the divine within, both in yourself and others, and then acting on it, that's the fifth universal soul's purpose. Number 6, manifest the glory of God to others. In other words, don't hide your spirituality under a rock. This doesn't mean you have to go out and proselytize and knock on the doors the way some groups do. This is fine if they want to do that. But if someone says, well, what is this meeting you go to every Wednesday night? Well, tell them it's a Search for God meeting. And if they say, well, what's that? Then you can say, well, it involves Edgar Cayce, who discussed spiritual principles, or it involves A Course in Miracles. I let people know what I'm doing, but I never dump a lot of stuff on them unless they request it. So if you make the statement, well, we go to a group that's discussing spiritual principles, and that's all the people want to know, fine, then you leave it go there. But if they want to know more, be prepared to step in. So manifesting the glory of God to others is our 6th universal soul's purpose. And finally, number 7, we are to recognize that each soul enters with a mission. And our job is to discover this, both for ourselves and for others. It's not enough just to find out our own mission, but graduate school, if you will, is to discover the mission of someone else and help them achieve their mission. And if you do that, you are on your path to one of these universal soul's purposes. So we have 7 universal soul's purposes altogether. I'll repeat them just if you're taking notes. Healing, number 1. Expressing love, number 2. Service to others, number 3. Forgiveness, number 4. 5, becoming more aware of the divine within. 6, manifesting the glory of God to others. And 7, recognizing that each soul enters with a mission.
That's not easy. None of those things are easy, are they, Ed?
No, that's why Cayce said this is the best school there is, but it's the toughest school. The neat thing is, can we practice these? Edgar Cayce said, every lifetime that we have in Earth, our soul either advances or retards. And we determine whether our soul advances or retards by our choices. Our choices is the key. Remember in the Harry Potter movies, Dumbledore talking to Harry Potter says the choices are important. Well, Cayce says the same thing. It's our choices. Course in Miracles says the same thing. The reason I have 2 spiritual paths, the Cayce readings and the Course in Miracles, they both say the same thing. They just use different words. The Course in Miracles has these real beautiful words that just everyone loves. And Edgar Cayce tells you how to do it. One way I think of it is the Edgar Cayce readings tell you how to implement A Course in Miracles. They both believe 90% of both are the same thing. They're just using different words.
Going back to forgiveness just for a moment. Forgiveness is I find that when you really feel like you've been wronged, it's not just, it's a process. I find that forgiveness is a process. It's not something that I can make up my mind that I want to forgive, but my emotions don't necessarily go along with me on the first try. So it seems to me that there's a process involved in that. Right,
and the Course in Miracles says that that's okay. You can make this prayer, Lord, I want to forgive this person, and I can't. I want to do it, but I can't, so I turn it all over to you. The key word in the Course in Miracles is willingness. If you have the willingness, Then you step back, turn it over to the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit will take care of everything. So we don't have to do it all ourselves, but we have to be willing to do it. And at that point, then the course says, Holy Spirit, God will take over as long as we are willing.
Good to know. So those are the universal purposes. But what about specific individual purposes? How do we know what our specific individual purpose is?
Well, that's a process, as you're talking about process. Everything with Cayce and with Course in Miracles is all a process. There's no snapping your fingers and it's going to be done tomorrow. It's step by step, little by little. As long as we're making progress slowly and steadily, like the tortoise in the race, then we're doing okay. So most people think of soul's purpose. They haven't thought about these universal purposes. They say, well, what's my individual purpose? What am I supposed to be here to do? So we're going to look at that because that's very important. Cayce said we are to be co-creators with God. Well, that's kind of neat, isn't it? We are to be co-creators with God. That means you're pretty important here. You're going to be co-creating with God. We are to align our will with the divine will. Someone asked Cayce, what is the purpose of life? And he said, quote, to know yourself, to be yourself, and yet one with God. We are an individual, but we're also one with God. There's a step-by-step procedure to do this. And the first thing to do, Cayce says, before we, in this process of determining our individual soul's purpose, is to establish a spiritual ideal. Edgar Cayce says the most important thing you can do in life is to establish a spiritual ideal. Why is this? Because it sets a standard. It sets a standard by which you make the choices in your life. And it also, the second purpose of a spiritual ideal, it tells us where we're going and how to get there. So in terms of setting a standard, if you're going to grow a garden, say a vegetable garden, well, you go out and buy books on how to do this because these books have like the standard way to be successful in growing a vegetable garden or a flower garden or whatever. And so if you follow the standard, then you're probably going to be successful. Well, the same thing with our soul's purpose. If you set your spiritual ideal, this establishes your standard. And then every time you make a decision in life, you say, okay, does this match my spiritual ideal or not? If it does, great. If the answer is no, you don't do it. And then the second thing is it tells us where we're going and how to get there. So what are examples of spiritual ideals? Well, we can find 9 of them in the Bible. In Galatians chapter 5, it lists 9 of these. Joy, love, compassion, oneness. We've all heard of the fruits of the Spirit. Well, pick any one of the fruits of the Spirit, and that's a perfect example of a spiritual ideal to choose. Cayce is big on the fruits of the Spirit, and he says apply the fruits of the Spirit to every decision you make in your life. So that's the first thing. We establish our spiritual ideal, and then we measure every decision we make against this ideal. Now, the second thing to do in determining our soul's purpose is your individual soul's purpose is to take an inventory of your strengths and talents. Ask yourself the question, what am I good at? Not the greatest English phrase, but that's really what it is. What am I good at? Cayce said, what you're here to do, you can do better than anyone else. So if you determine the things you're good at, then that's going to go a long way to finding your individual soul's purpose. So we try to find new and more creative ways to use whatever talents and strengths we have. And a lot of time people will say, well, I don't have that many talents or strengths. Well, we all have talents and strengths, but often they're hidden. We haven't thought about them for 40 or 50 years. We say, all right, what are my strengths? Maybe you're not going to think about them discover it the next day. You have to work at it a little bit. If you like to play the piano, maybe one of my purposes is to help other people learn to play the piano. Maybe I can teach some disadvantaged children to play the piano at the YM or YWCA. So if your strength is in gardening, then you can help other people maybe grow a garden that will make their home look a lot nicer because they have this nice garden of flowers out front. So the second step, first we find a spiritual ideal, and the second step in finding our individual soul's purpose is taking an inventory of our strengths and talents to determine what we do well. Then the third question, or third thing to do, is ask this question. Am I using this, i.e. these strengths and talents, to help others? Service. See, it all comes full circle. Am I using these strengths and talents to help others in service? And then the fourth step is to test your answers to questions 2 and 3 through application. The key is to take a research-oriented approach to discovering your soul's purpose. And the way you do this is through application. So you have to test what is appropriate and what is not. So maybe you say, well, I can teach people how to play the piano. And then you realize, gee, I don't, this isn't my thing. I can play, but I really can't teach people how to do it. All right, so we eliminate that. There are other things in your life that you can do that are your strengths. Life will give you feedback if you set the process in motion. The key is to set the process in motion, to do it. I'll throw this in here now. Cayce made a very interesting statement. He said, what good does it do you to learn all this information, and go to all these lectures and read all these books if you don't put it into action in your life? It's meaningless. Cayce is big on action. You must put into action what you learn. Remember, unused knowledge is sin, so consider that. So, continuing with testing on what you're good at and whether this is a thing you should do more of in your life. The surest sign that something isn't right for your soul's purpose isn't so much the presence of obstacles, but it's the lack of any positive reinforcement signs. Some people will say, well, yeah, maybe this is something I should be doing. Well, here's an obstacle and an obstacle here. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that it isn't something you should do. Maybe these are obstacles that you should overcome, that if you overcome these obstacles, then that will help you grow as well as providing service to others in doing your soul's purpose. So what I meant by this, lack of any positive reinforcement, if you're considering doing something and you pray about it and you want answers and you don't get anything positive, you don't get anything negative, you get nothing. You just get a blank. That's a sign that maybe this isn't the thing for you to do. There won't be a big giant voice come out of heaven and say, no, you're not supposed to do this. The lack of any positive reinforcement. Remember that the universe doesn't recognize a negative. God didn't create a negative. We created negative fear. So the universe will tend not to say a giant no. It'll just say nothing. So be alert for that. Be alert for that. That's a sign that maybe this particular action isn't the best for your life. And along with testing is synchronicity. I love synchronicity. The synchronicity, excuse me, simultaneous occurrence of seemingly unrelated events that all of a sudden come together and give you an answer. So for instance, let's say you have the question, should I move to Arizona? And you're watching television and here's a travel program on Arizona. And you're walking down the street and you go past a travel agency and hear signs in the window advertising tours to Arizona. And an ad comes on television advertising a product and this company is in Arizona. Well, that may be then a sign that synchronicity, none of these are related, but taking all together, it's synchronicity that maybe this might be a worthwhile thing to consider moving to Arizona. Number 5 in our list of determining our individual soul's purpose, ask yourself the question, what gets me inspired? What gets me inspired? Because what gets you inspired, you're going to go with it. People don't do things unless they get inspired by them. So if something gets you inspired, that's a strong sign that this may be related to your individual soul's purpose, and you should consider this. So those are the 5 basic approaches to soul's purpose. There are some additional things I call supplemental things for the individual soul's purpose, not as important as these first 5, but still worth considering. So number 1, music. If you listen to uplifting and inspiring music, what images come to mind when you listen to that? If certain images come to mind, then say to yourself, well, does this relate somehow to my individual soul's purpose? Likewise, if you do sacred dance, I teach sacred dance around the country. And as you're doing sacred dance, and this is a group activity, as you're doing sacred dance, if certain images come to mind, again, that could be an indication of something to do for your individual soul's purpose. Visual art is another thing. What pictures get you inspired? Do mandalas get you inspired? Whatever thoughts come to mind with these things are worth considering. And finally, inspiring stories, inspiring words through stories and myth, the Joseph Campbell type thing. So if you hear inspiring stories and myths, what words come to mind? It's worth considering those. Let me just jump back a second here to the law of synchronicity. This was created by Carl Jung, and it's the idea that our souls attract people and events into our lives that will help us grow and develop. So the law of synchronicity, it's the simultaneous, as I said, the simultaneous occurrence of events which don't seem to be related. And they have no recognizable causable connection, but they're sort of related, like our example for Arizona. So I just wanted to toss that in as an extra thing on synchronicity, because I'm big on synchronicity. If there's synchronicity, I'm going to pay attention to that.
Yeah, me too. But going back to the one of when you just don't get anything from the universe, you have to give it a little time, right? I mean, you can't, you wouldn't pray about something and then later on that day you don't get an answer, so you say, okay, that's not it. You'd have to give it a little. You'd have to have a little patience there, right?
Recognize that. Excuse me. We all have at least 2 guardian angels. Some of us may need more, but we all have at least two, according to the angel experts I've talked to. And the angel experts, the angels their purpose is to keep us on track for our soul's purpose. So if we go off track a little bit, their purpose is to give us a nudge, get us back on track. Now, if we've gone through 40, 50 years of our life and never thought about soul's purpose, and all of a sudden we make a prayer, okay, guardian angels or Holy Spirit, what's my soul's purpose? The obvious reaction is going to be, wait a minute, this person's gone through 50 years of their life never thinking about this, and all of a sudden they're asking a question. Are they really serious? We're going to see if they're really serious. So we're not going to give an answer right away. We're going to stall a little bit to see if they continue with this, to see if they're really serious with this. So that's again why Cayce said nothing happens instantly. It's slow, step by step, slow, steady progress. So if you don't get an answer to your prayer, or you're asking for a dream, Cayce was big on dreams and said, give yourself a pre-sleep suggestion just before you fall asleep. And one of these pre-sleep suggestions could be, Lord, help me have a dream that shows me what my soul's purpose is. You may not get anything for a week, 10 days, 2 weeks, because you haven't ever raised this issue before with God, the Holy Spirit, your guardian angels. But if you persist with it, you will get an answer. But you're right, Lynne, nothing's going to come with a snap of a finger.
So if you think that maybe you are fulfilling your soul's purpose, how would you know? How would you sort of look back and figure out if you are on the right track?
If it gets you inspired, if it makes you feel closer to God, and in a few minutes here, I'm going to ask 8 questions for each of you to answer privately to yourself, because the answer that you give to these questions is going to let you know specifically whether you're on track for your soul's purpose. Some people say, well, how do you determine if the soul's purpose you have selected for yourself is correct, your individual purpose? Well, there are several things you can do to determine whether or not what you've selected for yourself is correct. So first of all, that this activity that you've selected meets with very minimal resistance. Everything kind of falls into place for you to do this. Second, you feel good doing it. You're happy doing what you've selected. Number 3, it appears right. It feels right. Feels natural for you to be doing this. Number 4, you get better and better at it. The more you practice, the better you get at it. If you're doing something and you're not really happy with it, you may practice it a lot, but that doesn't mean you're going to get better at it because you're not really that interested. But if you're interested, you're going to get better and better. Another question to ask yourself, does what I'm doing give me joy? Key question to ask, does what I'm doing give me joy? Next, you can't wait to do more of it, whatever it is. Teaching the piano, showing somebody how to grow a garden, whatever. You can't wait to do this. Can't wait to get up the next day and do more of it. Also, people you know say that you do this well. People see you doing whatever you're doing, and they recognize, gee, you're pretty good at this. You're doing a good job at this. And finally, what you're doing brings a smile to other people's faces. If that happens, you know, you'll be pretty certain you're on track for your soul's purpose. Now, let me say here that our mission in life, or i.e. our soul's purpose, is more than just a vocational choice. there may be a vocation or hobby component to a person's mission, but Edgar Cayce described a particular soul's purpose as meeting a particular challenge in consciousness. In other words, it was much more broad than just a specific job in life. So here are some examples of some mission statements that people have come up with. And you'll see that these are kind of general in nature. They aren't real specific. So here are some examples. Being a spiritual leader using the arts. Having a sensitivity for the have-nots in life, people that are kind of down and out. Another example, glorifying God through nature. Next, being an innovator, getting things started. And likewise, being a finisher, seeing things through to completion. Bringing hope to others. The appreciation of beauty. These are all mission statements that people who have undergone this process and for weeks and months have come up with. You can see that a job may encompass some of this, but that these mission statements are much broader than just a particular individual hobby or a job. A couple other ideas: to transmit and clarify new ideas to others, to compassionately work for justice in the world, to be a spokesperson for the truth, to educate the soul, both your own soul and other people's souls, to direct and manage people to bring out their best. So those are sample mission statements, and that's the kind of statement that you want to do. So, for instance, one of the ones we read was to promote an understanding of beauty and appreciation of beauty in the earth. Well, a way you can do that is to teach people how to grow a flower garden. So that's a specific thing, but the flower garden is going to bring beauty to the earth, so you can see how this specific thing of the flower garden expands into our overall mission statement. Yeah, Lynn?
Why, since these are things that are so important and make so much difference in life, why do you think some people just, why do you think some people just ignore the whole topic of soul's purpose, or it just doesn't seem to occur to them to think of it that way, to look at it that way?
Well, that's a good question, and as we all probably know, the majority of people don't think about their soul's purpose. They just go through life. You all are, by virtue of being involved in listening to these lectures, you're probably more in tune with this than others. So why do so many people seem to ignore this whole topic of soul's purpose? Now, the majority of people seem to feel a soul's purpose vaguely, but they find a way to numb themselves and tune this question out. And I think there are three reasons that people do this. Number one, they don't want to hear the answer, because the answer might require them to make changes that they're not sure they want to make. So they're nervous about this. And so, for example, well, I don't want to learn my soul's purpose, because if I do, it could be God is going to tell me to buy Bibles and go rent a boat and float down the Amazon and pass out Bibles to the natives, and I don't want to do this, so I'm going to just ignore this whole thing. Well, that's really saying God doesn't know what he's doing. We all know that the way to get somebody to do something is to ask them to do something they're already good at and they enjoy doing. So obviously, if you don't want to float down the Amazon passing out Bibles, God and the Holy Spirit aren't going to ask you to do that. That would be counterproductive to the whole thing. But the rest of the world doesn't think that way. They just think, I'm going to be asked to do this thing I don't want to do. The second reason people seem to ignore this whole topic is they're afraid the answer may call them to be something bigger than they think they're worthy of being. They think, well, I'm just little me. I can't do this big thing. Well, how dare we think that we are less than what God created? Unfortunately, a lot of people think this, and that's just too bad. And three, another reason why people don't think about it is they're just plain lazy. They just want to go through life having a party, watching television, immersing themselves in social activities and a book. So that
Making,
go ahead.
making a living takes a lot of energy sometimes.
Yeah, so that doesn't mean you get away from discovering your soul's purpose. It just means you're going to have to come back and do it again. You didn't do it this lifetime. You're going to have to come back and do it eventually. But those are the three main reasons I think why people just kind of tune out on this whole topic.
And if you believe that you have found your soul's purpose, how do you know if you're making progress? You said that if you found your soul's purpose, if you're doing your soul's purpose, you should be getting better and better at it. How do we know? How do we know we're making progress?
Well, there's two ways. Number one, I listed those 8 ways to determine if that's your correct soul's purpose. And now is probably the best time to ask these 8 questions or make 8 statements and see if they apply to your life. And I call these universal characteristics of a soul's purpose, inward signs that we might expect to notice as indicators that we're on the right track. So I'm going to give you these 8 questions. They're not always in the form of a question. They're really 8 criteria. And ask yourself if you meet these criteria. Now, you may not meet them all. That's okay. But ask yourself if you meet some of these criteria. Number 1, do you have a greater sense of wonder and awe about life? Things just open up to you in unexpected ways that often just brings a feeling of wonder about life. If this happens often, it's a sign that you are on track for your soul's purpose. Second, every soul's mission has some aspect of creative service, as we said before. A person should be a light unto others and a feeling of closeness to others without, and this comes by giving without any expectation of getting something in return. Remember, Cayce said, for the souls you are destined to serve, you can do it better than anyone else. The number of souls you serve is unimportant. It's immaterial. The quality of help is what is important. So the quality, you can serve 100 people in a soup kitchen, or you can help an infirm person go to the grocery store to shop because they can't do it on their own. The quality is key. The number is immaterial. Bottom line for number 2, if you see other people blessed by your life, you know you are on track for your soul's purpose. If you see other people blessed by your life, you know you are on track for your soul's purpose. Number 3, if you are doing your soul's purpose, you feel closer to God. If you are living your mission in life, you will feel a greater sense of wholeness, a sense of being more complete and closer to God. An example of this is that the frustrations you have in life will be removed. And what these frustrations are replaced with, you will recognize as something good that comes from God.
Will all of your frustrations be removed if you're following your soul's purpose?
Well, not necessarily. but some of them will be. In other words, this isn't a snap your fingers thing. You may get rid of a frustration in 1 week and another one in 5 years, because this is an ongoing process. But you will find, we all have frustrations. That's why we're still here in Earth School. If all of our frustrations are removed and we feel one with God, we're probably out of here to the next school. So that's number 3. The question is, do you feel closer to God? Are frustrations being removed in your life and being replaced by things that you recognize that come from God, that come from the Holy Spirit? Number 4, you see the purpose of life in others. You mentioned this before as one of the universal soul's purpose. If you are living your mission in life, you will begin to see the purpose you will begin to see other people's purpose in life, and you'll help them fulfill that purpose. That's key. You will also recognize that everything happens for a purpose. Everything happens for a purpose. May not be able to tell what the purpose is now, but everything happens for a purpose. Number 5 in our list of 8 criteria that are universal characteristics of a soul's purpose. Number 5, joy. Mentioned that earlier. If you are living your mission, it will give you great joy. And this joy will be far greater than any joy gained from doing something that might put you into the history books of life. Joy. Number 6, transcendent energy. It's a big word. Transcendent energy. What this means is there are days when you tap into an energy flow that comes from beyond your own resources. You don't know where you got all this energy to do this work, but you got it and you're doing it. Transcendent energy. Now, this will not come every day, but if it comes now and then, it helps you in your purpose. Why? Well, that's good. What is your cat's name, by the way, there?
That one was Rowena. The other one was Hermione. But
Hermione?
yeah. But we're a little bit off the topic here. Yeah.
Well, I like cats, so I just want. So, transcendent energy is number 6. Number 7, being in the right place at the right time. Resources that are critical come with the right timing as they are needed. The person you need to meet shows up. The financial resources you need to do your mission show up. The self-confidence you need shows up. The time you need becomes available. If all of these things occur, not necessarily every day, but they occur periodically as you go along, that's a sign you're on track for your soul's purpose. And number 8, very important, peace. If you are doing your mission, it will give you great peace. And you will often have feelings of great peace. The Course in Miracles says the whole goal of the Course in Miracles is to bring us peace. It says our function is to practice forgiveness, because forgiveness will make us happy, and if we're happy, we'll have peace. So peace is important. So I'll list these 6 things once again real quickly here. 8 characteristics to determine whether you're on track for your soul's purpose. You have, number 1, greater sense of awe and wonder about life. 2, creative service. 3, you feel closer to God. 4, you see the purpose of life in others. 5, joy. 6, transcendent energy. 7, being at the right place at the right time. All the resources you need show up when you need them. And finally, peace. Now, in going through these, what if you said to yourself, well, gee, I don't really have hardly any of these apply to my life. Well, don't beat yourself up. Ask yourself, can I just tweak my life a little bit so that then I can find a purpose, and maybe 6 months from now, some of these things will apply. So the purpose of asking these questions is not to throw a guilt trip on you if you don't have a positive response to them. The reason to ask the questions is if they don't apply in your life, ask yourself the question, what can I do to have them apply in my life? There are some corollaries here on our soul's purpose idea. If you're following your soul's purpose, it doesn't necessarily mean that everything falls into place and you're on easy street for the rest of your life. Look at all the problems in Cayce's life. If you aren't familiar with Cayce, he started a hospital for healing and it had to close because of financial considerations. People accused him of all sorts of bad things, falsely, but he was accused. So everything didn't go well in his life. So don't necessarily think that because things aren't always going well in your life doesn't mean you're not doing what you should be doing. But all of these 8 criteria were reinforcing signs in Cayce's life that were happening with regularity and told him that he was doing what he needed to be doing. Now, also recognize not all of these 8 steps will happen at the same time. Maybe 2 or 3 are happening now, and 6 months or a year from now before another couple happen. If none of these steps are occurring in your life, then be a spiritual researcher. Go back and analyze your life and say, well, why? Why isn't this happening in my life? Look at your strengths. And if you already have made a mission statement and it doesn't seem to be working, then maybe you just need to tweak your mission statement a little bit. Now, recognize we all stray from our mission. That's why we're all still here in Earth School. But every day, things happen to nudge us back toward our mission. That's our guardian angel's job. Their job is to give us nudges to get back on track. Be alert for the nudges. Be alert for the nudges. Also, at different stages in your life, your mission may take on a different aspect. Your purpose can even change. So this is why you can't say, well, I've lived most of my life, so I don't have to think about my mission anymore. No, maybe you've done your first mission, and now you have a second mission. Maybe God and the Holy Spirit will give you a 3-week vacation, but you're going to have another mission if you're still here in Earth School. Also, recognize that discovering your soul's purpose is not simply knowing your purpose, it's living it. You must live it. It's not knowledge per se that's important, but what one does with this knowledge. Cannot emphasize this enough. Cayce emphasizes it over and over again.
Ed?
Yep.
Hercules is telling us that we need to wrap up now. So if there are any more points that are important to make, we have about 5 minutes to go.
Yeah, I saw the signal there. So
okay, good.
Now we're down to 4 minutes.
Okay.
Very alert to the time.
Good.
So it's not knowledge per se, but what one does with that knowledge that will determine whether your soul advances or retards in this lifetime. And I'll conclude here with a Cayce quote, which says, quote, if we fulfill our purpose to our best ability, then others, seeing this, will take hope also. So we can bring hope to others if others see us doing our soul's purpose. So that pretty much wraps up our quick summary of soul's purpose here. Any final questions you had, Lynne, on this?
Not really questions. I've just had a reaction because thinking about your biography, you know, traveling around the country and sometimes the world, teaching these concepts, teaching sacred dance, doing church services, and calling square dances. It sounds like, I guess, if for somebody who likes to travel, it just sounds like a pretty amazing lifestyle. It sounds like I'm sure it has its downsides, but it sounds like a very joyful lifestyle.
That's why my name is Foote, because I like to travel. Because I put my soul into my work, and then nobody can call me a heel. And I make no arch enemies, and I toe the line.
One of the things I didn't put into, for our audience, one of the things I didn't put into Ed's bio is that he sometimes also does stand-up comedy for certain for certain events. Not kind of terrible jokes, but funny at the same time. So, well, thank you very much, Ed. I really appreciated what you've shared. And I hope it's been helpful to some folks out there. And I love to talk to you again sometime. I got very intrigued about sacred dance when we were talking about that before this.
If people want to get in touch with me, my purpose in life now, even though I do these other things, my purpose in life now is to do these lectures, whether it's by Zoom or in person. So if you want to contact me, my email address is edcall, C-A-L-L, at Zoom, Z-O-O-M, internet.net. If you're east of the Mississippi, I would be glad to consider coming and doing a live talk for you on purpose. I'm always available to do Zoom talks at any time for anyone in the country. But this is my thing to do. I have 13 talks that I give, so I really enjoy doing this.
Could you repeat that email address again?
Edcall, E-D-C-A-L-L, at Zoom, Z-O-O-M, internet.net. I will mention on the second Friday in August 9th, I'll be doing a lecture for Cayce, Canada. And it's how to receive, the title is How to Receive Spiritual Guidance and Make Spiritual Decisions. Okay, that'll be a 2-hour talk for Cayce, Canada. They've had me the last 2 years, and they're having me again in August.
Is that in person or is that by Zoom?
On Zoom. So if you Google Cayce, Canada, contemporary Cayce, Canada, hopefully you'll find this there. I want to thank everyone for listening to my talk here. I appreciate it, and hope we'll see you somewhere again.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you very much for sharing with us tonight.
Thank you both very much for an excellent, informative, and deep program. It'll be on YouTube tomorrow. I will send a link to Lynne, and I guess you can get it from Lynne.
Thank you, Hercules.
Okay, thank you. Good night.
Good night.
I always get confused with the buttons here.
I find it difficult to go on YouTube because when I go on it, it should be me too. When you go on it, it's YouTube, but when I'm on it, it's me too.
Very good point. I will meditate upon that tonight. Thank you very much, Ed.